the Lord himself. In the book of Revelation chapter 5 and verse 12, the Bible says, saying with a loud voice, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. And yet, when a family is destroyed, that family is no longer giving to God the glory, the honor, the blessing that he deserves. And that's what he wants. He wants to steal that, because if he can steal that away from the Lord, then he feels like he's gaining it for himself. And again, that's his goal, that he would be like the Most High. And so that's what he wants. No family is without conflict. There's no such thing as a family without conflict. Conflict in the home occurs because we're human. We're all human. We all do wrong at times. But we have a stubborn will. We have pride in us. And quite often, that's really at the root of the problems in the home. It's our own stubborn will. It's our own pride. And conflict within the family is displayed with spouse against spouse, parents against children, children against their parents, and so on. And it's sad when you see it, but it does happen. Back over here in 1 John chapter 1. 1 John chapter 1. Excuse me. If we deny the conflict that exists within every home, what we're doing is making ourselves out to be liars. Oh, I know. We're supposed to be kind and tender in all the words that we use, but that's what God says here. 1 John 1:6. If we say that we have fellowship with him and walk in darkness, we lie and do not the truth. Look at verse 8. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. Verse 10. If we say that we have not sinned, we make him a liar and his word is not in us. Those are pretty strong words. But if we deny that, oh yeah, there's no conflict in the home, well, we're making God out to be a liar, and we are making ourselves liars, because that's not true. When a man states that he and his wife have never argued, or they've never disagreed, he's either a wimp or a liar. Or, quite likely, he's both. He's a wimp, and he doesn't want to admit it, so he lies about it. Anyway, so to admit that, yeah, there is conflict in the home, that does not make us less. It makes us real. Because that's where we all are at one time or another. But also, when we finally come to the place of admitting, yeah, there's conflict in our home, and there is from time to time, and it's in these areas, whatever. Once we begin to admit that, then we're actually open to learn how to deal with it. But as long as we try and cover it up and pretend it's not there, we'll never deal with it. And it'll never get better. In fact, things will only end up getting worse. So the greatest thing that a family can learn is how to deal with the conflict that arises in the home. Because again, it happens. It happens like in our home. We have 5 warm bodies in our home. And they each have their own brain. And they each have their own way of thinking. And even though as the head of the home, I do set the direction of the home. Here's our direction. But in the day-to-day, there's sometimes that some people have different ideas about how to accomplish the goals, how to do things, and so on. And that can bring conflict. Sort of like I thought I told you to take the trash out. Well, I was going to do that later. But I thought I told you to take it out. I didn't tell you to take it out later. So I'm just saying, it's not necessarily a conflict. That's not conflict to me. That's just stating fact. And it goes just fine when I state fact that way. But I'm just saying that when you have different people, which we talked about in the earlier service, that in the family you may have X number of people in your family. No two of you are going to think alike. No two of you are going to see things exactly the same way. Just like when I was home, my dad and I, we agreed on so many things. Sort of like there's never a bad time for ice cream. We agreed on that, and we still agree on that, and it was great. But you know what? Dad and I didn't agree on everything. We didn't, and I'm not talking about doctrine. I'm talking more like when I wanted to go to bed at night. I'm talking about the little things. And here's what I did. Dad and I compromised on this. We were living in the bush of Papua New Guinea, and we had a generator for our power. And Dad finally said, look, if you want to stay up a little later, you go out and turn the generator off. Because you had to go out and walk a good 20, 30 meters to the generator house and actually physically turn off the generator, walk back to the house in the dark, hope it's not raining because then you're walking through mud, and you slip and slide the whole way back because it is pitch black because nobody else had electricity. And so Dad and I compromised that way, and it was great. It was fine. And I really didn't stay up that long after Dad and Mom went to bed anyway. Usually maybe 20, 30 minutes was all. But anyway, but we compromised. But you see, that could have been a big conflict had we both been hard-headed about it. And but anyway, the thing is, when there is conflict in the home, ignoring it does not make it go away. When there's a problem, ignoring the problem does not make it go away, ever. Ever. Instead, what it does is it makes the conflict much worse when you finally face up to it. When you finally come in and, okay, here's the problem. It's not this anymore, it's this. And so it's better to deal with things early on. Learning how to properly deal with family conflict will also teach children how to properly conduct themselves in a world gone mad. And we certainly live in one of those. In Ephesians chapter 4, learning how to deal properly with family conflict makes the home a place of peace and tranquility, which I believe is what God intended for it to be. A place of peace and tranquility, a place where it would be a haven from the helter-skelter of our wicked world. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 7 says, "And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus." So we learn how to properly deal with conflict in the family. We can enjoy the peace that passeth understanding. And that's when your neighbors start saying, well, you know, you've heard us argue and fight. How come we don't hear that from you? How come we hear your kids singing when our kids, they never sing? They don't do anything together except fight, you know, and that sort of thing. Anyway, let's talk about conflict's timeline. Back over in the book of Ephesians chapter 4, what we find is that there are times that anger is the proper response to conflict in the home. The idea that we should never, ever, ever get angry is not biblical. No, I'm glad it's not biblical because it's also not possible. Because we're in this human flesh. Now, yes, God can give us victory over our own flesh. And we can get victory over our own temper. We can. I'm not saying that it's easy, and I'm not saying it's simple, but it can be done. But there are times that we should get angry. There are times. Here in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, the Bible says, "Be angry and sin not." And then it goes on to say, "Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. Be ye angry." Back over in Mark chapter 3. Mark chapter 3. And in the beginning verses of this chapter, we find that anger is an acceptable or a proper response when accepted activities are in contradiction to God's plan. Now, you'll see what I'm saying when we read this. Mark chapter 3, verse 1, "And he entered again into the synagogue, and there was a man there which had a withered hand. And they watched him whether he would heal him on the Sabbath day, that they might accuse him. And he saith unto the man which had the withered hand, Stand forth. And he saith unto them, Is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath days, or to do evil, to save life, or to kill? But they held their peace. And when he had looked round about on them with anger, being grieved for the hardness of their hearts, he saith unto the man, Stretch forth thine hand. And he stretched it out. And his hand was restored whole as the other. So there's anger here, but the anger is really at the attitude. It's not at the individuals. but it's at the attitude, the unbelief, and the sheer gall, really, of these men. But that's where the anger is. Look over in Nehemiah chapter 13. Nehemiah chapter 13. Here's another time when anger is the proper response to conflict in the home. And that's when error has knowingly been brought into the home. When error has knowingly been brought into the home. Well, what does that mean? I don't think I need to give you any illustrations about that. I think it speaks for itself. But when you have kids sneaking stuff into the house behind Dad and Mom's back, and Dad and Mom find out about it, should Dad and Mom say, oh, well, I guess they're doing that now, and just leave it? Oh, no. There ought to be some righteous anger, not at the children, at the sin of deception, because that's what's going on, and maybe other things as well. Nehemiah 13, verses 7 and 8. And I came to Jerusalem and understood of the evil that Eliashib did for Tobiah in preparing him a chamber in the courts of the house of God. And it grieved me sore. Therefore I cast forth all the household stuff of Tobiah out of the chamber. Nehemiah was a pretty active dude. You know, he didn't let grass grow under his feet. He said he was grieved sore. What does that mean? He was really upset. He was angry. And this is righteous anger. He did not do wrong here. Oh, Nehemiah, you should have had a better attitude. You should have been considering what they were doing and what they wanted. No, it was wrong. What was going on was wrong. And you realize, in this particular case, it was a zeal for the house of God. Thank God for some people with a zeal for the house of God. But the same thing is true in the home. If we have issues in the home, and the basis of that is that people have knowingly done things that are error, that are wrong. So, you know, we as parents, we try and teach our children, this is right, this is wrong. And then your children go do what's wrong, thinking you're never going to find out because, you know, parents are idiots. They were never young people themselves. So they have no idea how to be slick and sly and to do different things that, you know, the parents will never find out about. So you find out about it because, of course, you're going to find out about it because kids are never as smart as they think they are. And so they get caught. Should there be anger? Yes. Oh, no, you should be calm and collected. No. Look, remember what we said about parents. What you are doing as parents is you are teaching your children about how to conduct themselves in a relationship with God. If they do wrong before God, will God ever be angry? Yes. Now, is God always angry? No, He's not. Is God always looking to beat us over the head? No, He's not. And so we as parents shouldn't be that way to our children either. But the thing is, if we're trying to teach our children how to conduct themselves with God, they ought to understand what it is to deal with anger. Because they've done wrong. Not because, you know, their hair won't comb right. Anyway, in each of these cases, the anger is not based on a personal indignation. Oh, you hurt my feelings as a parent, so now I'm going to be mad at you. Or, you hurt my feelings as a spouse, so I'm going to be mad at you. That's not the basis of this anger at all. But it's an indignation due to the righteousness and holiness of God being flagrantly ignored. Now, going back over to Ephesians chapter 4, what we find is that there is no time that anger needs to be held on to beyond the date of the offense. What does that mean? It means what it says. Ephesians 4, verse 26, be angry and sin not. Let not the sun go down upon your wrath. So, if you get angry, you need to deal with it that day. Don't wait till later. Oh, I'm so upset, I'm not going to deal with it now. You know what we do when we do that. I mean, you know what we do. When we put it off and we say, well, I'm so upset, I'll deal with it later. We don't deal with it. And then the conflict is there always under the surface but never dealt with. Well, that's bad news. That's just bad news, and it causes more problems in the home in the long run. When there's a misunderstanding or miscommunication between husband and wife, the issue needs to be dealt with before the end of the day. Now, is it always easy to deal with? No, it's not. You know why? Because again, you're not married to yourself. God may say that you're one flesh, but you don't think alike. You know, because some people, as I've said before, some people don't know which end of the toothpaste tube to squeeze. You know, and so you don't see things the same way. But you have to put aside your feelings so you can deal with conflict. And that really is the main issue, because we have to set aside our own pride if we're going to set aside our feelings so that we can deal with conflict. And that, it's an essential. It's an essential. So there may be a time for a necessity for a husband and wife to cool off before they come to an understanding and resolution of the issue. But that should never carry over into the next day. So what am I saying? I'm saying, yeah, some people have a hot temper and they need to go and cool off before they can be reasonable. And some people need to do that until God gives them victory over their temper. Then they need to do that. But regardless, they need to deal with that issue that day. I like what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 6 and verse number 34, where he says here in the very end of this verse, he says, "Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof." Don't put off the day's problems until tomorrow. You know, husband and wife, you're mad at each other, and you're so mad at each other that you just can't hardly see straight. And so it's like, all right, I'm not even going to deal with this now. You know what I'm talking about? So you go to bed. Do you sleep? No. No, you're tossing and turning and thinking about all the things I should have said. Right? And, you know, if I wasn't so tired, I'd get up and write this down. I'll just read it to him tomorrow. And that's what you do. And then the next day, well, you know, the husband's got to get up and go to work. So he's thinking about it all day. The wife's home stewing all day thinking about it. And then you get home. Well, they haven't dealt with any of the problems of that day, because they're still messing with the problems of the day before. You're hurting yourself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. You don't need to borrow yesterday's problems and just hang on to it till tomorrow or next week, next year, or as the case may be. So we have to be really careful to deal with things. That's part of the timeline. Yes, maybe we were right to get angry about it, but then we need to deal with it. Not just get angry and, well, now I feel better because I had my say. No, deal with the problem. That's what you have to. Otherwise, you haven't dealt with the problem, right? And I know that's sort of a no-brainer, but sometimes that's what we do. We get mad, we blow off steam, and then we go on as if everything's okay, but we never dealt with the root of the problem. Never dealt with the conflict. And that's dangerous in a home. And so we have to be careful in the timeline. So the consequences of the conflict can be felt for some time to come, even if the conflict has been resolved on the date that it arises. So, again, when we're talking about dealing with the conflict, we're talking about its timeline. Well, I dealt with it. You know, we had a come to Jesus meeting, and we dealt with the conflict, and it's all done. But you know what? Sometimes the conflict may be done, but the consequences aren't. You know, sort of like when some years ago I was flying overseas, and when I got to, not where I was going, but I got to a place where I was stopping for a day or two, I called my wife, and the first thing out of her mouth wasn't, "I love you, honey," it wasn't, "I miss you." Not at all. She said, "I totaled your car." That's the first words out of her mouth. I had hung up, but she had to dial 75 numbers just to call overseas. So it wasn't where, no, I'm kidding. I wasn't wanting to do that. But she thought it was going to be a big conflict. She thought I was going to be really upset, really angry. I was jet lagged, and I was just sure she was pulling my leg. And it took me a while to figure out, no, she's being serious about this. And it's like, oh man, that's terrible. But I'm on the other side of the world, so I really don't care, because I don't have to deal with it, until I get home. And so, again, it didn't end up being a conflict, although certainly it could have. But the consequences of that? When I got home, I didn't have a car. I had to go find something else. And what's really bad is the last thing I told her before I got on the plane is, don't wreck my car. Seriously, that's the last thing I said to her. So what did she do? First chance she got, she went and wrecked it. Not just wrecked it, but she totaled it. I thought she's supposed to listen to her husband. But anyway, I'm not bitter at all. And really, I'm not. I'm not bitter at all about it. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It really, and thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. I mean, looking at the vehicle, you would think surely someone must have died, but nobody did. And God was good. God was good in the whole thing, and I think God blessed in the whole situation. Looking back on it now, in the moment, it didn't seem like it. But you see, the consequences of that, which could have been a great conflict between us, the consequences were still going on, even almost a month later. So, for example, in talking about the home, when a child, they do something wrong, you get upset with them, and you say, okay, you're going to lose privileges of whatever kind. You can't breathe air for a week. Whatever. Well, you may have dealt with the conflict, but the consequences are still going on. So it's not, the conflict may be done, but it's not over with. So we have to understand that. Same thing when a parent tells a child that they're going to lose privileges for X number of days. Look, as a parent, you have to follow through on that. You can't say, well, look, you're going to do this, and then 5 minutes later, well, never mind. Don't do that, because number one, you're lying to your children. What your children take away from that is, I don't have to believe what dad or mom say first time around. And again, we're trying to teach them how to deal with God. God doesn't lie to us. When God tells us it's going to be this, that's exactly what it is. And so we need to be serious in dealing with our kids. But we're lying to our children. We're teaching our children that our word can't be trusted. We teach our children that we can be coerced into lessening the loss of privilege. If you whine and cry enough, then okay, fine, go back and do whatever you want to do. That's not smart, because God's not going to do that. So you're actually hurting your children. You're hurting their future. You're affecting their relationship with God by doing that. You think, that's such a little thing. It really doesn't matter, but it does. Every little thing does matter. And then, of course, when a husband and a wife, and I'm using this as an example, when they have a conflict over finances, they may reconcile and they may resolve the conflict, but they may still be subject to the poor financial choices that were made. So you sign your name on the dotted line. That's going to cause a conflict. When you do that, don't tell your spouse, hey, look, honey, look what I bought. We're only in the hole for 20 years, Easy payments. And so here we are in the hole, and, so again, you have a come to Jesus meeting with your spouse, and you decide, look, we're not going to do that kind of thing anymore. From now on, we're going to discuss these sorts of things, and we're going to be wise in the decisions we make. But guess what? You're still going to have to pay off what you signed your name on. You still have the consequences of that. So when we're talking about conflict, the consequence may linger on for a while, but the conflict itself needs to be dealt with right up front. Back over in Matthew chapter 18, in verse number 15, we see not only conflict's timeline, but we also see conflict's truth. Excuse me. Matthew 18 and verse number 15. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. So when there's a conflict in a home, there is a temptation to share the misery with family, friends, and coworkers, right? Come to work Monday morning, you know what my husband did, you know what my wife did, you know what my kids are doing, and you can tell it's not good because of the smoke rolling out of their ears, and that sort of thing. There's that temptation, and the reason that we do that is we're trying to recruit allies to our side. That's what we're doing. What's that got to do with resolving conflict in the home? If you're recruiting allies, you're not looking to resolve conflict. You're looking to start a war. Which is true. And then, of course, this is done to make the cause of our mate or our children look foolish. Well, they're so dumb. Look what they did. And of course, if the roles were reversed, then we'd think exactly like our spouse. But that's different, because that's us. Look over in Proverbs chapter 18. When we do this, when we go around and we try and spread our conflict, share the misery, all we're doing is causing greater hurt. All we're doing is causing greater conflict. We're just making it worse. Just making it worse instead of making it better. Proverbs 18 and verse number 8. The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. The worst thing that a spouse can find out is that their mate's been at work talking about them, telling stuff on them. Unless, of course, they've been doing the same, then they think, well, so what? I've been doing the same to them. But it still hurts. No. So those who are enlisted to our cause, they're going to discriminate against those with whom we have a conflict long after the conflict's forgotten. We finally get things worked out. We're not going to go back to all those people that we ran down our spouse or our children to and talk about all the family problems. We're not going to go back to them and say, oh, we got things worked out now, everything's good. We're not going to do that. We're going to just ignore it. So they're still mad at our spouse, they're still mad at our kids, and we just don't care. We worked it out. Usually, those privy to the conflict are not privy to its resolution, and they carry the offense of another for years to come. They become bitter on your behalf for something that you worked out years ago. Well, that's wrong. That's wrong. And so you shouldn't do that. You got a problem with somebody, don't go tell somebody else about it. It's not somebody else's business. And especially when we're talking about it in the home setting. That's definitely not the way to do it. Those with whom we are in conflict will be doubly hurt to know we've shared a personal conflict with others. And when this pattern of behavior continues, the conflict becomes more difficult to resolve. Verse 19 of Proverbs 18, a brother offended is harder to be won than a strong city, and their contentions are like the bars of a castle. So if you consistently share your family problems with friends and outside family, I'm talking about extended family and co-workers and so on, that's going to make it harder and harder for your spouse to want to resolve conflict. Because as soon as you get upset, you're going to go do the exact same thing. It's like, hey, I'm done. I don't need this anymore. I'm out of here. And that's exactly what does happen a lot of times. And so it's a sad situation that families do find themselves in. But there are more things to that. There's some positive things that we can learn from this. But we're going to go ahead and stop here. We'll pick up from this point next week and see what the best course of action is in relation to conflict in the home. Let's stand together with our heads bowed and eyes closed.